Hi, I'm Jean LeStourgeon, and I create forms and other tools that make mental health counselor work easier. By the end of this brief presentation on SOAP note examples, you'll take away these three things. Number one, you'll understand the SOAP acronym better. Number two, together we'll view a practical example of a SOAP note. And number three, you'll see how a quality SOAP note actually does half the work for you. But before we begin, you should know that forms don't have to be a necessary evil. In fact, quality forms will serve as a guide that lead you and your clients through the therapeutic process. I think you'll see exactly what I mean as we go through a SOAP note example in just a few moments. But first, let's talk about the SOAP acronym. First, the S refers to subjective data. This is referring to what your clients tell you. It would include things like symptoms and current stressors and motivation level. It might also include what they're most interested in resolving or working on. You might want to use words like client reported as you document the data in this section of your note. The O stands for objective data. This has to do with what you observe about the client in the session. It should be documented in measurable and observable ways. So the therapist wants to use words like observed in writing this section of the note. Keep in mind, this is not your opinion. I want you to think measurable and observable. The A refers to the assessment. Now, this is the core of the note. This is where you as a clinician take what the client shares, the subjective data, and assimilate it with what you as a professional therapist observed and try to make sense out of it for the purpose of helping your client. The P is the plan. This is the action step. This would include what the counselor as well as what the client are committing to. The plan can also include recommendations and referral information, though on a good quality SOAP note, you might have a secondary section to remind you to write recommendations and referrals. Now here's a takeaway tip. Remember that the S, O, A, and P should flow from one element of the note format to the next to create a meaningful conclusion in the assessment and plan. Let's take a look at an actual SOAP note example. You can see that the treatment goal addressed is noted. In this case, it's improve mood. The clinician noted additional client concerns for the day or for that session. In this case, it's client reports feeling tired and depressed. Now, this actually is also considered subjective data and could easily just be put under the subjective data section. Additionally, the client reported she did not want to get out of bed this morning, saying, I felt especially groggy this morning. The objective data or behavioral observations. In this case, the therapist noted that the client had a hard time keeping their eyes open during the session. This happened 4 times, and that there was a medication increase 2 days prior. Here, the counselor's assessment is it appears the client may be over-medicated. An appropriate plan in this case, number 1, for client safety would be to contact a family member for a ride home. Number 2, to contact the medical doctor about the dosing and symptoms. And finally, that the client and the counselor will review the symptoms and the plan outcome at the next session. Here's another takeaway tip. Make sure you schedule time after each session to at least begin your SOAP note. It should take about 5 minutes to write your SOAP. But one of the problems we run into when writing our SOAP notes is not making the time to complete them soon after the session. Make sure you commit to finishing your notes at least by the end of each working day. And finally, in summary, SOAP stands for S, subjective, that is your client's report. O, objective, this is largely the measurable and observable observations. A is the assessment, where you assimilate the S and the O. And finally, the peer plan, which is the action steps you and your client are committed to. For more tools and forms to make your job easier, go to soapnoteexample.com or intakeforms.net, or just click the link in the description below. And for more counseling forms tips, subscribe to my Counseling Forms YouTube channel.